I'm here with Larry Ortega of Community Union, and we are going to be talking about 5G and the digital divide. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. Really appreciate to be here.
So, does 5G bridge the digital divide? Let's cut to the chase.
You want the short answer or the long answer?
I want it all.
I'll give you the short answer. The short answer is absolutely not, right? It doesn't even come close. The long answer is that 5G, the whole selling of they sell 5G, it's being sold as the thing that's going to close the digital divide. It's basically just the next new shiny nickel, right? It's the next new little gimmick thing that the telecoms are pushing out. And they've really seized on the pandemic, right, as an excuse to, bring this out and just kind of bulldoze over all kinds of laws, take more control, really do more deregulation, and basically just kind of have their way on how America gets its information. And that's wrong, right? Now, we understand that they have a fiduciary duty to, maximize profits for their shareholders, but there also needs to be that balance, that balance of consumer interest, right? Consumer safety. Those are the things that I think that are not being had here. And, you want to get right to it, right? The COVID pandemic essentially yanked back the curtain. For all the hurt and the pain that dereg caused, for all the hurt and the pain that the pandemic caused, right? What it did is it actually shone a light on what was going on, right? How deep the digital divide was. And the fact that millions of kids, mostly Black and brown kids, right? Mostly low-income families, were not able to get connected all these years, right? We're talking about 10 years running. This just didn't happen, right? The last year, with the pandemic. This has been an ongoing strategy that the telecommunication industry here in California, right, was actually given deference to price, set prices to whatever they wanted it to be, to put the technology wherever they wanted to put it. In fact, it was codified into law here in California. It's called a Public Utilities Code 710, actually codified the commingling of wired business along with wireless businesses. And what that did is that stripped out all of the financial incentives to build out the fiber optic. They were supposed to go in and actually replace all of our copper wire with fiber optic wire, and thereby giving everybody this, world-class telecommunication service, right? But what we found out is that there was these reports that showed that this law that was passed in 2012 here in California actually incentivized the communication industry to redline these communities, right? They said, like, okay, we are financially incentivized that we don't have to put this technology in these low-income areas because our fiduciary duty requires us to maximize profit. And if we do that, we're not going to be maximizing profit, right? And so the collateral damage, if you will, right, of Black and brown kids not being able to connect was simply that, right? Was simply just an acceptable consequence for the industry. And there was nothing on the other side, right, that was balancing the industry's interest, right? You had the consumer interests that were just essentially being bulldozed over, and we found out through the pandemic that these guys were not getting our low-income communities did not have access. And now you have the industry coming in saying, hey, we can solve this, and for folks like myself, right, it's brazenly offensive, right, for them to come out and say we can fix the very problem that we created, right, and saying that what we need is more of the stuff that you've given us already, which is deregulation, in order to do this, so that we can continue to bulldoze over consumer interests, right? So what we've learned through all of this, right, is that the industry cannot be trusted to close the digital divide, right? And that their commitment to build out a world-class telecommunication infrastructure is very suspect because, to my knowledge and to my colleagues' knowledge, across the country, there's really no plans on deploying 5G in low-income communities anyway, because they're not even going to be able to afford it. Now, that aside, 5G is third-rate technology, right? So what do I mean by that, right? Admittedly, that 5G is 100 times faster than 4G technology. That's true, and that seems like, wow, I have 4G right now, and I have a chance of getting something 100 times faster. And you're thinking like, well, that's great. But when you match it up against what fiber optics can do, right? It's 10,000 times slower than what the fiber to the premises could do. And that is, when the telecommunication industry is saying, hey, we're going to come in and we're going to bring 5G to everybody, we're again, best case scenario is we're shortchanging the very communities that they're intending to help, right? By not giving them the fiber optics that they should be having, right? So that's the biggest problem. And the other thing with 5G is that there's so many challenges with it. If wireless technology was truly a solution in closing the digital divide, we would not have had the gigantic challenges that we had where here in California again, 40% of our kids were not even able to attend school on a regular basis because they couldn't connect, right? Now, there isn't a high school kid that I know, right, that doesn't have a cell phone. So if wireless technology was so great and so good, I don't think we would have had that many children not being able to connect to do, schoolwork, right? So you have already evidence that's already in the record, if you will, right? That says, wireless technology is not the best. And now when you do the comparison through these studies, right, that have been done by EFF, they show that, yeah, 5G is faster than 4G, but it's 10,000 times slower, than fiber optics. And when you combine that with, the health concerns, the cancer causing, studies show that 5G wireless technology causes cancer. These are federally funded studies. And that, the idea of giving the industry, more dereg deference, and, there's no way there's no incentive for them to make it affordable. So even with full on 5G deployment in all of these communities, right? The very people that can't afford the internet today are going to be those same people that aren't going to be able to afford 5G down the road. And we're not even going to talk about the privacy issues and all of that. But that's my long answer. Sorry.
Well, so you've been working on digital equity and connecting people who don't have connected for many years. Can you tell me about what communities need in order to connect to the internet? Because what's being stated in our community is that we got to bring in 5G and give companies full reign of everyone's front yard so that kids aren't going to be going to McDonald's to connect to Wi-Fi to go to school. That's what's being put forward here and in communities across the country. So what do families need?
Yeah, all the families need, we need, to really get at the core of it, we need more competition, right? The fact that the issue is this particular industry is monopolized in the way that it is, and it's under a deregulation regime, right? The fact that it's under a deregulation regime means that, they can do basically whatever they want to do. There's nothing that forces them to set fair pricing. There's nothing then that says, okay, these folks can get it, but these folks cannot get it. There's nothing there. And so the fact that there's no competition means that prices, and so how they do it, how the industry does it, right, is that they say, okay, here's the territory we intend to serve, and they get all their, the three of them together, AT&T, Verizon, the other guys, right? And they say, okay, we're going to divvy up this area. You get this spot, we get that spot, and you get this spot. But, don't charge under $100 a month, right? So we agree to do that, right? And we can do that because there's no regulation that says we can't do that. And so without competition, right, with nobody able to compete, to say, hey, I have the same service, but it's like, 30% of what you guys are trying to charge. So the fact that affordability has been elusive, right, has kept the fact that there's no competition, rather, that has kept affordability elusive for many of our communities is at the crux of the problem, right? They need affordable broadband. That's the bottom line. And what we found out, over the last 10 years, right, is that it has to be safe. I mean, it's like all of a sudden, all of these studies, I think there's like 1,000+ studies that say that, all of the challenges that wireless causes from a health perspective, from DNA damage to cancer, to mitochondria interruption, to breaking the cell membranes, to entering the brain of a small child, and all these numerous challenges that wireless studies, thousands of studies that have been proven that it's harmful. Our kids need to be safe, right? They need to be safe first and foremost. I mean, they may have the 5G tech. Let's say, for example, they have 5G technology, right? There's some way able to, some kind of discount that allows them to afford that. But they're not in a safe environment, right? So kids need to have the wire technology. Our families need to have wire technology, and it needs to be affordable. And the thing is, it's not, I mean, for so many years, and I've been saying this for, 10 years plus, right? Is that, or it's not, it's that the technology, internet to the home, right, is no longer a luxury. It's as common as, a food to eat, a meal in the morning, glasses to read a book, water that runs, so they can have running water, lights that go on, high-speed internet, high-speed broadband, fiber optic to the home is on that same level. It's the same need that our households should have. There's no reason why they shouldn't have that information coming to their house. And the thing is that the industry, right, initially set out to replace all of our copper wires with fiber optics. They actually set out to do that, and they were given extreme deference. They were able to raise rates. I mean, you'll remember that our landline rates, early 2000s, were about $12 to $15, right? Today, we can't get into a landline for under $65 a month, right? And the reason is that the government gave the telecommunication industry extreme deference to raise rates on the idea, on the promise, right, that they were going to replace all of the copper wire with fiber. And they didn't do that, right? And there's studies that have been published, and there's a group called the Regulators that's based out of New York that fought the FCC on this, right, and won, right? They found out that the states were utilizing an accounting system that was outdated and that they did not need to, but in so using that accounting system, it allowed the incumbent telephone providers to not deliver on these promises that they were making about deploying the fiber optic network that they were supposed to be doing, given that they were getting the rate increases that they had been asking for. So it gets very, complicated, but the crux of the issue is that it's really very simple, right? We cannot give industry more leverage. They don't deserve it, and they've proven that when they've gotten it, right, they failed us miserably, right? I mean, just look at the millions and millions of kids who were not connected.
Right.
Thought, they were going to be connected.
Right. Well, now in California, as well as many countries, many states in the United States, and countries too, they are asking to be further deregulated, to be able to just apply and put up antennas wherever they want, when they want, how they want. And they certainly don't want people roadblocking that, much less trees or animals or anything. They just want to be able to put their infrastructure as they desire with no accountability as to who they're serving or how that service will be.
And that's, you know, and that's the most outrageous thing about this, right? Is that, you know, you have to have a device, right? You need to have that. Let's start with that, right? Our low-income neighborhoods, the folks that I've been training. So I've been doing this since 1994, right? I've been working in digital divide communities before it was even called that.
Wow.
and I did that. I did that on the idea that I was believing that I could really make the impact in our communities by turning them onto this technology. Because in 1992, 1993, nobody knew about the internet, right? And so as a computer information systems graduate from Cal Poly Pomona here, I was like, man, this is, I mean, we've been asking for, you know, as minorities, right? We've been asking for, man, if only the playing field was leveled, right? Economically and, you know, educationally, you know, if only the playing field could be leveled. And then bam, the internet hits, right? And then I see it like, oh my gosh, what a golden opportunity, because nobody knew about the internet at that time. Nobody knew, you know, what it could do or what it could do. But I knew that for me, being in this area, right, of expertise, I knew that it was an opportunity for us to really move in that direction. And we were going to get access to the same information at the same speed that everybody else was going to get it, right? Or at least I thought. And so my idea was like, let me create education centers throughout, you know, the region where I can bring kids in. And I started working with kids initially, right? And got them really excited. And, you know, we got on the front page of various Spanish speaking newspapers. And, you know, we got a lot of articles covered in some of the local press in English. And it was a huge success. And, you know, graduating thousands and thousands of kids every year. And then we got to a point where, you know, in 2003, 2004, it became like kids were to technology like fish to water, right? Mm-hmm. So we're like, okay, all right, I think our job's done here, right? But then what we realized is that parents had actually got leapfrogged over the whole technology explosion, right? Yes. And they were behind, and they weren't in a position, you know, decision-wise to say, yeah, let's bring that technology into the house, because they didn't know what it was and they were actually afraid of it, right? Mm-hmm. So we started classes working with parents, and we did this. We found that, you know, our Spanish-speaking community was the one that were the most resistant to the technology, didn't understand it. But once they did understand it, they were like the first adopters. They were like, okay, yeah, let's get that stuff in here. Don't care what it costs. Let's make it happen. Let's buy the computer. Let's get the internet service, and let's do this thing because I'm seeing that it's helping, you know, little Johnny and little Susie do better, you know, in school, right? So they were like, you know, they're all in for the kids, right? And so we had a really successful run in educating parents, and we started doing it in language. And then not only in Spanish, we did it in Korean, we did it in Chinese. And, you know, we look back at it now, we have partnerships throughout the state, right? California, Silicon Valley and the Central Valley, you know, Fresno, and in LA and Orange counties. And we were doing a lot of stuff with our partners, you know. So the idea was we were taking school labs that were idle. When the bell rang at 3 o'clock, the school labs became available, right? And there's this rich resource in these low-income communities that essentially goes underutilized. And so what we did is we said, okay, let's do classes in these centers here. And then we also partnered with libraries, again, another rich resource that we were able then to, in the Silicon Valley area, partner with some of the libraries out there to bring, again, mostly Spanish-speaking monolingual parents in, learn how to utilize the technology. And even to this day, right, you would think like, well, who doesn't have an email address? There's still thousands and thousands of parents, I can tell you, in my expert opinion, that still are not connected and want to be connected. But the thing is again, getting back to the affordability, right? So that's an important aspect of the digital divide that, you know, there's many dimensions to the digital divide, right? And I think that was my point that I was trying to make here, is that it's not just connectivity by itself, right? There's affordability, there's training, there's the devices, right, that are actually needed to connect, right? So infrastructure, you know, albeit an important piece, is really it's just one dimension
Right.
to a multidimensional issue that, if you're going to talk about, closing, and I don't really like those using closing, I talk about bridging the digital divide. I mean, there's a lot of, dimensions to that. And those are the things that I don't think are being looked at, but the industry has seized on the moment. I mean, and of course, right? So cleverly, they've said, if we could close the digital divide, just give us more dereg and we'll put up antennas and poles, we'll put antennas on poles everywhere and everybody will have the service. Well, what they've missed is, number one, the affordability aspect of it, right? Number two, the devices. Do the people have the devices? Do they know how to use the devices? And number three, what about the health concerns, right? I mean, it's like, how cool would it be if I had a gas station, right next door, right? Shoot, I could just, every time I wanted to, I could just, how convenient would that be, right? But do I want a gas station next to my, next door, right? It's like, no, right? So the convenience aspect of it is definitely a factor, right? But it needs to be balanced against, reality. And reality in this sense, right, is the health issues, the health concerns, right? And all of the damage that it could do. I mean, there's studies that say that kids are not going to learn as well when there's, a lot of RF bouncing around in classrooms. And just an anecdotal story with my own daughter, as a teacher, right? She was teaching in a charter school. And for a year, right, she was exhausted. She would sleep 12 hours. She would wake up. She would be almost falling asleep on the way to work. And then she would be almost falling asleep in the classroom. And she was going to the doctors and nobody could tell her what was going on, right? And once I got into this, trying to find out more and more about what RF does and the radio frequency waves do, we stumbled upon this map that showed like where all these towers were, right? And I told her, hey, Mija, give me your address where the school was, right? So I typed it in, and I wanted just to see if there was, because her symptoms were kind of like, RF symptoms, the electromagnetic sensitivity symptoms, a little bit like it. And I was like, let me find out. Well, lo and behold, right, when we typed in her address where she used to work at this charter school, they literally had a cell phone tower right over her building. So she was under a tower all this time, and she didn't even know it during that time frame when she was working at charter school. And once she stopped working there, she got better.
Really?
Again, and it was just, so it was amazing. So for me, I have firsthand kind of experience with, a family member of mine, right, being negatively affected by this. And you add on top of that the thousands of studies that say, yeah, this stuff is really happening. And so it really blows my mind sometimes when, you have these elected officials that come back and they say, yeah, but you know what, we're not really sure. It's like, oh my gosh, like how could you even be in that room of not being sure with just the overwhelming amount of scientific data and then just logic. I mean, if you were to just break it down by common sense, right? If we look at ourselves, right, we are we have a central nervous system, right? It's all around, we're a bunch of electrode, right, running through us, right, sending these messages. And just common sense says that if something is passing through you, like radio frequency waves from cell phones or 5G, right, there's got to be some kind of interruption. To what level, we don't know, but these studies have proven that it can be a very significant level if it's consistent, right? And what they're talking about now, the industry is like, oh, hey, we're gonna solve the digital divide. All we need to do is just put an antenna right outside your window. It's going to be on 24/7, but don't worry about the disruption to your own central nervous system. That's just a consequence, an acceptable consequence for us, given our fiduciary duty to our shareholders to maximize profit, right? And that
we have pictures of antennas in our community that are put up on buildings, and a lot of apartment buildings where there's no radio frequency monitoring for the people who live right next door to, like, so if you have a building that's kind of an L shape and you have the antennas on one side, their line of sight into the apartment building. But what we know about some of these low-income apartment complexes is a lot of people inside aren't even using those antennas. The building is being used by the companies and by the building owners, but the people inside aren't even using that to access the internet. They're not, many of them are underserved. So all of it is, it's a house of cards. And, I guess I was looking at the Portland Digital Equity Report, and I didn't know, I actually should have asked you before we started this, but who's doing reports on addressing, what are the needs of the communities? Because what I found when I've kind of looked into this, which makes total sense, is that it's not like there's a one size fits all. You start to drill in, there's different things for different areas and you can go super local. Apartment buildings, for example, where they only have one choice. The one choice, and it's not really gonna, like you said, there's only one choice, one provider, it's $100 a month, and that's it. And they don't even have any other choices. So of course they're not going to connect to the internet. They're gonna just use their smartphones, be smartphone dependent. And that signal is of course pulling to get outside. And it's really, really not a good plan. Homework on a smartphone is not the answer or the way forward.
Right.
But tell me about the needs assessments and kind of the understanding of what is needed. Has that been done in California? Has it been done in your community? And who else is doing it?
Yeah, I think just on the cell phone thing, I wanted to kind of touch back on that and say that it is a myth right now, that is an acceptable myth, a well kind of almost ingrained myth that every kid that has a cell phone can do their homework on it or can do what is it they need to do on it. But what the pandemic, again, and all the horror that the pandemic brought, what it did is it revealed, like, no, they can't, because millions of kids were not connecting to their school. So we have to dispel, I think the first thing that some of these studies have done, and there's plenty that are out there that have shown that kids can't do their homework on a cell phone. And besides that, I mean, America doesn't even do business that way, right? I mean, you go to any bank, any insurance company, you go into City Hall, you go, they're all hardwired, right? They're connected to a hardwired computer. And that's how America generally does business. Sure, sometimes you're going to need, cell phone to connect remotely and to do some stuff really quick on the fly. No question about that. And we're always going to need that, right? But it shouldn't be the driver behind like setting up what does our infrastructure need to look like, right? Because again, it doesn't meet the need, right? We've already seen that. The evidence is already in the record that the wireless, infrastructure by itself doesn't work, right? And so the need, the kids that are performing the best, just look at your high income neighborhoods, right? What family doesn't have a hardwired connection that lives in a upper middle class or upper income neighborhood? They all do, because they know that is the best that is available, right? And so why does that change now? Because I live on this side, on the south side of the tracks, right? Our families live on in low income neighborhoods, and now all of a sudden they don't need wired connection. Why? How did that happen? Because if you're upper income, upper middle class, or just middle class, right? Primary to your household, you got to have a hardwired connection. Period. It's just standard. You don't even think
right.
And so those are the facts, that are already out there. And the fact that a lot of our, just to share a couple anecdotal stories with you, on how this wireless technology, how it failed a lot of our communities in our area, is that they gave a bunch of MiFi devices, these wireless devices. When the pandemic hit, the schools were like, oh, shoot, man, telephone, they weren't even saying telephone companies failed us. They were just like, we got to get all of our kids connected. If we're going to continue to create, generate revenue, they got to some way be able to attend school, right? Otherwise, we can't get the dollars, right? The attendance dollars, right? So they're like, okay, the master plan at that point was to deploy all these wireless devices. And then they would do this, they would limit these devices, one device per household.
Wait,
what if you have,
what?
yeah. So, yeah.
You mean, so if you had, what if you had 3 kids? Do you have 3 MiFis?
No, you don't. You get one per household. Yeah, that was the genius behind some of these plans, right? So here was the problem, right? So you get one device for one kid, supposed to connect through a Zoom conversation, on this wireless device.
Oh my
But then
goodness.
sister and brother had to be on the same device. And, anyway, it was a mess, right? It did not work. And so those same challenges are going to exist, right? So let's say you do have a 5G connection, which is, okay, admittedly 100 times faster than 4G. Yes, but what happens when you have to run 3 kids through that same device, right? And 3 kids have to be on Zoom at the same time. How is that going to work, right? It's not going to work, right?
It also, when you dig into it, when you're inside the house, are they really thinking that when you start to look into the actually like the brass tacks, none of it adds up. When you're inside the house, if they're using the MiFi, are they saying the MiFis are going to have 5G and that all these kids are going to have new 5G tablets and laptops? So are we going to get rid of all the devices that have been handed out to all of these children? And none of it actually makes any sense, actually, once you go into the details. I'm just shocked to hear that. And you know what happened in our community right next door, sorry, that's my phone ringing in the other room, is the MiFis have a fire risk. So they've all been recalled. So there was like all this MiFis going out, cheap devices,
Right.
and now they're all recalled. And really the solution is having wired broadband into people's homes and having that be a basic part of building. When you build homes and apartments and condos and all kinds of living spaces should have connection.
Just like they did when we were building out our telephone system, everybody had copper.
Which they're pulling out now, which we can't even get in our area.
Yeah. And so the thing is like, as you said, right? It doesn't even make sense once you break it all down. So when you asked me to do this, I was very happy, and thank you for inviting me to be part of and share my my knowledge with you. But yeah, it's all a myth. The whole wireless 5G stuff, it's all a myth. Once you break it down past the connectivity piece, right? Which again, if you're aiming to solve the digital divide by itself, right? It's multi-layered, it's multi-dimensional, it's not just one thing. So you get the connectivity part, okay, great, you got step 1 done, right? But there's still, a host of other steps that need to get done there, right? And it's like anything else, it's just the first piece of the puzzle. There's many other things to do there. But the industry has been successful in this psyching out all of the leadership, the elected officials, school board members, city council members, state officials, even the federal officials, right? Are all buying into the idea that, okay, telephone companies, in Spanish, we say sana sana, okay, it's going to be better, it's going to be better. We'll make it better. That was, you have a coco, you have a hurt, we're going to make it better, right? Sana sana, right? No, man. I mean, you guys failed, industry failed. Sorry, you guys blew it. And what you showed us is that you cannot be trusted, right? And so now we have to take it into our own hands. We have to balance consumer interests, and more importantly, most important here, right? Consumer safety. Consumer safety. We have safety around cars, around toasters, around microwave ovens, around everything. Building codes, right? When you build a house, you build an addition to your room. There's all kinds of safety concerns, right? They go into this so that people aren't hurt. For some reason or another, safety doesn't matter with wireless technology. It's like amazing. It's just like, how is that even possible? Especially given all of the, the studies, the thousands of studies, across the globe, not just in the United States, but across the globe that say this stuff is going to cause harm to your small children, which is why, they have these warnings, right? Keep your wireless phones away from, pregnant women, or pregnant women shouldn't be next to cell towers, right? They have these warning signs, right? Say, well, if it's not safe for pregnant women, for for fetus, right, in a mom, it must not be safe for other things as well, right? So, I mean, these are the things that just are not, for whatever reason, industry has done a fantastic job of controlling the narrative about, bearing the health concerns, and it goes all the way up and down from the very basics, like I said, city council, through the state elected officials, and all the way to our federal, our congressional and our senators, right? Our US senators. And it's like, wow, yeah, it shouldn't be there. Like, we shouldn't even never have to have a conversation about, is RF dangerous? Is radio frequencies from cell phones dangerous? That's a conversation we should never have. Like, is drinking gasoline dangerous, right? It's like, yeah.
It's also not, it's not our responsibility to be the FBI. It's not our responsibility to have to be like, well, is it? Isn't it? Why are we even asking this question? Why isn't the government accountable on this issue? And I would say, when the Environmental Protection Agency was defunded in 1996, which is what happened here, the Environmental Protection Agency was tasked to develop federally developed safety limits, the whole like, what is safe question. And they were fully defunded in 1996 after actually being money being pulled away starting in the late 80s, when it became apparent that there were these biological effects. And that's really going to trip up companies' bottom line, because they just, the design of the infrastructure, the technology is designed to work and for the machines not to be interfered with, but it's not about interfering with people. That's a problem, to just, how do we make this technology work best to move the information faster? And since then, we've had no review of the entire body of science, which just keeps growing. In France, you were saying pregnant women in France, when you buy a phone, they passed a law a few years ago. They've actually been passing laws since 2010. It's not perfect, but as an example of how far ahead of the game they are, it says, do not keep this phone on the abdomen of teenagers. And it says, and keep away from a pregnant woman's abdomen, on the laps of teenagers and pregnant women's abdomen. Yet when we buy these devices, our kids and our teenagers are, sleeping with them on their chest. Pregnant women rest it on their abdomen like it's a shelf to hold the phone, unaware that there could be antennas in the bottom of that phone, which are right there, especially when you're at your 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th month, and there's not much between the baby and the phone antenna, but no one's informed. I wasn't informed.
It literally shocks the conscience. It literally shocks the conscience, and the lack of information from that perspective, that you're just saying that. I mean, how could it even be? And as I said, I mean, the industry has been successful on the messaging, and
Yeah.
people, the thing is that, going back to, what are the needs, right? You would ask me about that. And what our communities need is a world-class telecommunication infrastructure. That's the bottom line. I mean, that's where we're at. That's what we need. And, so what is that? When I say that, what does that mean, right? Well, we need to look no further than the 27 developed countries that are ahead of us in the fiber deployment, right? These are countries who have, some of these countries are 80% fiber wired. There's an OECD report. It's an OECD 2020 report. I'll put a link in fact, I might be able to do it right now. I'll put a link in the chat box if you want me to do that.
Yeah, after that'd be great.
Yeah. So the OECD report in 2020 showed that, the world-class telecommunication is defined by fiber to the premises, right? That it's a mandate, not an option, right? And the reason why, these people are ahead of us in that is that industry has, again, controlled the narrative, right? And if we got some of these facts out, right, that again, 5G can't penetrate, doors or walls, right? That it's, 10,000 times slower than fiber, that, it's cancer causing, that, it's unaffordable, right? It will be unaffordable. You want 5G, you're going to have to buy a 5G device. Well, heck, our folks, what does that cost? Like, I think $1,000 or something, right? Who in our community, our low-income communities, who in our low-income communities are going to drop $1,000 for a 5G device? I'll tell you, none. There'll be nobody that's going to do that. So, it's like we either want a world-class telecommunication infrastructure or we don't, right? I mean, that's where we are right now. We're in the fork in the road right now, right? And if we continue to allow the industry, who's not the bad guy, right? I don't want to make the industry to be the bad guy, right? They have a fiduciary duty of maximizing profits. And a lot of my friends and colleagues work for these guys, and they're yanking down $200,000-$300,000 a year, right? They have a family to support. So that, I mean, it's not the bad guy. They're not the bad guy, right? They're creating quality of life for a lot of people, right? But what needs to be, measured here is there has to be a balance, right? Consumer interest, like there is with everything else except wireless, right? It's just amazing. There has to be a balance of consumer interest and consumer safety, right?
Right. And data. That, like, show us the data. Show us, you're saying you're connecting. Let's have some accountability. Who have you connected? How's it working? How's it going?
And connectability, right? And they don't have it, right? In fact, there's not even any plans, like, as I said earlier, a lot, we've asked for plans of, like, where are you going to deploy 5G in these low-income communities? I mean, Pomona, right? My city that I live in, right? 95% of the kids are on free and reduced lunch in the city of Pomona, right? Okay, so telecommunication industry, show me where you guys are going to deploy, 5G to connect everybody, down the barrios and, and the back, ways to make sure that everybody's connected. Show me those plans. They don't have them. They don't exist, right? Which, goes again to the idea that 5G, this whole wireless thing, is nothing but a myth. It's only an idea to let them, reduce cost of deployment, and they're going to continue to, redline communities that don't have it now because there's nothing that says that's going to make them do it, right? They're in this deregulated regime that's going to allow them to further this. And so this whole thing about them closing the divide, it's all hoopla, man. It's not real. It's just smoke and mirrors, and the evidence is already on the table that proves that, right?
Right.
By them not having any plans to be in low-income communities, by them continuing to say that they need to be in a deregulated environment under a deregulated regime. Under that regime, there's no way, just based on their own, their core fiduciary duty is to maximize profit. Just based on that, there's no way they're all of it going to suddenly on their own make up their mind and say, okay, hey, let's go ahead and let's give these guys in these low-income communities 5G for free, right? I mean, come on. It won't happen.
You know what they're doing in some communities, we've been told, is they're saying, oh, you can swap out your phone for free for a 5G phone, but actually it's not really free. You swap it out and then you have to be tied into a 2-year plan, or it's like a mortgage fiasco. It's like suddenly you're in this whole other situation. So it's not, people are then trapped with the provider.
Yeah.
It's,
no, the gimmicks are out there, and they'll continue to be out there, and the thing is that, folks from my community specifically, the Latino community, they're like, okay, what do I got to pay per month? They're just like on a per month basis, right? They're not like, okay, how much is this thing going to cost me? You mean $10,000 by the time I finish paying for it? For a $50 phone, it's going to cost me $10,000 by the time I'm done. But my payments are only going to be $20 a month. So,
Right.
okay. And so, I mean, there's a whole, again, talking about the different dimensions to the digital divide, right? It's the financial education, right? Financial literacy of our community as well. That's another layer, right? That we haven't even talked about, because these gimmicks, exist for everything from buying washer, dryers, computers, cars, I mean, etc. Right? But our community just looks at that one payment and they're like, okay, I can live with that. Not recognizing that it's costing them, 100 times the actual value of whatever that product was for anybody else buying it, off the shelf, whatever it may be. So it's a complicated issue, man. But in a very simplistic form, 5G is just a myth, and it's not going to close the digital divide, in my expert opinion. And I've been doing this stuff since 1994. If I did, man, if I thought 5G, if this stuff was going to actually close the digital divide, I'd be the first guy in the car.
Right.
I'd be the first guy in the car. I'll be like, boom, let's do this bad boy. Come on. And I'd be advocating for it,
Right.
But that's not where it is, and it shouldn't be where anybody who's listening to this, don't get caught up in any of the hype. It's being presented as the next new shiny nickel. It's not that by any stretch of the imagination, Consumer interest, consumer pricing, consumer service, not a part of this deployment plan or campaign that the industry is on at all, anywhere, at any level. Their words is all they have. That's all they're saying. And so far, they've done a good job in convincing a lot of people. But when you get to the evidence, man, that stuff, you're looking around at an empty room. There ain't nothing in there for us as consumers.
Right. No guarantees. There's a lot of talk, but not a lot of walk. And we've had a time to really see that that's the case too. It's not like, there isn't a history to look back on and see who's connected and who's not. I thought you said some really profound things. And one of them, which find myself saying since our last talk, was when you said that the people who are unconnected now will be unconnected then. You can put this all up, but it'll be the same communities with the same problems that haven't been fixed. Reminds me of our educational challenges that we face as well, where there's a lot of hype around different ways to save our schools when they aren't dealing with the underlying causes of the issues and the real needs of the community, which requires time and money and accountability. And it's not a quick fix.
Yeah.
Investment. We need to invest.
Yeah, and that's a good point. The quick fix thing is an excellent point, because it's like in this campaign that the industry is doing, they're presenting it like it is, it just happened. But they've had right? They've had like what, 25 years, right? To since what was the 1996 Telecommunication Act, right? Major dereg bill, right? Gives them all the deference in the world, right? To do what they want to do, how they want to do it, and whatever. And so they've had a long time. So it's going to take a minute for us to get out of this. And if it means a 10-year deployment program for fiber optic to the premises, to the houses, right? Then that's what it means, right? I mean, there's 27 countries that are ahead of the United States on this issue, right? That they've done it. We're the richest country in the world, right? How is it that we're not able to get there or recognize that as a priority, right? And that's all that needs to be, that's the important thing that needs to be brought home, right? Is that what are the models, right? We're not talking about kind of pie in the sky, thinking about this in a very hypothetical way. This is reality, right? There are countries, 27 to be exact, right? According to this OECD report that says fiber to the premises is what defines a world-class telecommunication infrastructure. And in so doing, get this, right? So earlier I had talked about the lack of competition and the fact that there was no competition, right? Was the thing that allowed them to fix pricing. And I was okay. So if you have fiber to the premises, now anybody can jump into the game. The municipalities, right? The cities themselves can then start being the internet provider. And there's so many double bottom lines there, right? One, price of service for the entire city becomes lower than it would be for what the telecommunication industry is currently offering it at. Two, it becomes a revenue stream for the city that they did not previously have, and now they do. Three, now everybody's connected, right? Businesses can talk to people, people can talk to businesses, they, and education and everybody. So teachers in our school district, right, can now give the assignments to their kids without fearing that they don't have internet at home, and they can get the help that they need in reading and in math. And what a tremendous difference it's going to make, in trying to grow the seeds of our future economic viability here in, this city and in the country, right? So these are just things that just have to happen. I mean, it's like, it's like confusing stuff about the health, argument, right? And where we get into that, it's like, we shouldn't even be having a discussion, should it be wireless or should it be wired, right? There should be like no discussion. It's like, should we give you a pipe to get water, or should we still continue to make you go to the well and bring it in a bucket, right? It's like, there's just like no question. It has to be, you have to have fiber to the house, man. That's where it needs to start at. And then from there, you'll see, right? As 27 other developed countries are already ahead of us, right? So we need to do something in that area.
Yeah. Well, so many other countries also have much more stringent levels of what's allowable in terms of cell tower radiation, up to 100 times or more. And in those countries, the wireless industry is lobbying very hard to have them change their laws so that there will be more radiation allowed in the name of 5G. Because to put up 5G, they're going to need to, put up all of these new quote unquote small industry word cell towers, and they need the countries to change their laws to accommodate that, or they won't be able to do all of that. So just recently, when that was happening in Italy, and by the way, they have been successful in Poland, but in Italy, they're working hard to have Italy change its law. And Dr. Linda Birnbaum, who's the former National Institutes of Environmental Health Sciences director, Chris Portier, who worked at the National Institute of Environmental Health at the CDC, and other experts, Dr. Davis, they wrote a letter to the government of Italy saying, don't change your limits, keep them as they are, because if you loosen them, there is this body of research which is growing, which is adding to the classification that radio frequency radiation is possibly cancer causing, which was back in 2011. And now we believe that it's probable, if not proven, because there's so much more science over the last decade. And we allow among the most radiation in terms of cell towers. Then if you look at what the different limits are in different countries, we're at the top. We allow, we're the loosest. We have the loosest laws. Other countries are far more stringent on this issue. I know I'm hopping into the radiation issue, but I know you wanted to talk about this as well. But it's just shocking what's happened in the United States. We're like the Wild West here with the industry running the show. And since 1996, that was one of the most heavily lobbied bills ever. It may actually be the most heavily lobbied bill.
Yeah, and there
in DC.
I mean, there's
federally.
Yeah, the fact that and it's not just at the federal level. I mean, you have our current I'm not sure if I spoke about this, but in 2012, the then state senator, now U.S. Senator Alex Padilla, introduced a bill, SB 1161, which was just, at the time I wrote about it, right? I wrote an article about this, and I said, more dereg is not going to get us there. And lo and behold, look at, I mean, it's crystal ball moment, right? Here we are 21, and it was like, yeah, see, and it gave, codified the commingling of the wired and the wireless lines of businesses, and allowed the redlining. It created a financial incentive for the communication industry to say, we don't have to build in these low income communities. So it's like, it's like saying these communities don't need water, or they don't need electricity, right? It's the same thing now. It's on that same level. And so, for his good work, right? The way that I look at it is for then State Senator Alex Padilla's good work in for the industry at this point. Now he's been blessed to be a U.S. senator, right? And it's like, he's going to have that same, kind of mentality where I don't think he's going to be empathetic to, the health concerns. It's going to be business concerns first, and bulldoze everything else over that, right? So it is, and the funny thing is that, Senator Padilla comes from a family from the San Fernando Valley. I mean, his folks came here, as immigrants, right? So he is the child of immigrants, right? From probably a low-income community family at one time. I don't specifically know his story, but he should be empathetic to these issues. At that time, he wasn't. I'm not sure if he recognized, if he knew what we were going to be up against in 2020 and 2021. But it really unveiled this stuff, is that, we have people from our community, right? People that are, look like us, talk like us. I mean, Senator Padilla talks way better Spanish than I do, right? And is very sensitized to the needs of the community, in my opinion, I think, but has chosen a path, in his position that says, okay, I need to prioritize, business. I need to, make this happen. And so, there's a lot of our legislators that are like that's kind of confusing, for me. I know that as we think that people who look like us and talk like us and came from our communities are going to hold the same values as us, but I mean, they have different, and I can't speak for them, right? I mean, I don't knock any of our legislators and the work that they've done, or legislators rather, and the work that they've done and where they are and how they got there, but we have to measure their role, right, with, our role where we are on this side. And to think that they are going to just simply be in the car with us on this issue because of where they came from, or because of, they look like us or speak like us, right, is a false assumption, if not out and out wrong, right? I think that we continue to need to measure those things that, that they're getting a lot of money from the industry, number one. A friend of mine that I've known for 30 years, she's the majority leader for the assembly here in the state of California. And we've had this conversation with her early on, like back in February, before these bills that were, being rammed through and kind of sailing through the legislature right now. We tried to talk to her about it, but, she wasn't listening. And she gets it. I mean, she was elected to the assembly on the idea that she was going to work for the people, right? That she was going to be the people's representative. And I got your back, man. And she defeated an incumbent, right? A heavily funded incumbent. I think the incumbent was well funded by the oil industry, right? And she took her down. And now she's there in the legislature as the state, assembly majority leader, and is just not hearing, any of this stuff. And it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier, before we got on the line, is that there's an education campaign that if they don't, once they get there, I think, the legislators themselves, once they get there, it's a different ball game for them. They're no longer in the I'm going to work for you kind of mode. They're now in the like who's going to make the most noise mode, right? And if you cannot muster up enough noise, right, to outshout the hundreds of millions of dollars that's they're being, the lobbyists are put in their coffers, right? If you can't outshout that, then you're not going to be heard. And, that's just the reality of kind of like what our world is today, unfortunately. But it's that education component that we need to work on, right? To make sure we get that louder voice heard.
Well, how do we, I mean, it's all about money. It just comes down to money because the people who are working on this issue and are working all the time. It's nonstop. And then if you have a job on top of that, and how did this happen? I mean, how did the community get left out?
I think your point is right. It is all about money, and let's be real, right? We have to put food on the table for our families, right? And how we do that is extremely important. Or the fact that we do that, right, is extremely important, right? But there is, I would argue, right, and I don't quite have the evidence to support this argument, so I'll have to say it hypothetically at the moment. But I would argue that there is more money for our brothers and sisters who are in the wireline business, if they jumped in the car with us right now than there would be going along with the wireless industry, right? For example, there is more money in labor and everybody who is affected, in labor through telecommunications in one form or another. For them jumping in the car with it, there's more money for small businesses if we were able to reduce their costs by half, because now it's not under a deregulation regime, it's under a regulated regime, which means that pricing has to be fair and reasonable. Think about that. Why is the concept of pricing fair and reasonable so foreign to us now, right? It's like, imagine if I could reduce your phone bill by half, right? Would you, what would that do to your business, right? As a small businessman or small businesswoman, right? What would that do for you there? Or, for the nonprofits, right? For example, I know a lot of the nonprofits, my brothers and sisters in this battle, from long ago, right, are funded by Verizon, funded by the AT&Ts, right? And are obligated to testify at Senate hearing time or Assembly hearing time or CPC.
Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
Tell me more, because I can tell you some. And for people who don't know what you're talking about, this needs to be clarified because it happens all the time here in Maryland.
Happens all the time, everywhere. The industry will give money to nonprofit organizations whose charge and mission is to help community, to serve kids with autism, to serve the elderly, to provide meals on wheels, to on and on and on and on, right?
Right.
Every social good that you can think about, right, is a possibility for the telecommunication industry to actually fund that nonprofit. But in so doing, right, you're then expected to get in the car with them when they're trying to do more of these shenanigans, like promoting 5G as the next shining new, right? And what happens is that there's more. The corporations, the industry has a certain amount of money that they have to give out. But if you think about it from the terms of, there'll be more money for these nonprofit organizations, in my hypothetical, right, if they would ask for more regulations, because costs would drop. Now, all of a sudden, just because you're in a low-income neighborhood doesn't matter, because you now have fiber, right? And it doesn't matter also because now there's competition, and that your municipality is actually being able to serve you better than the industry could have served you. So now all of a sudden, let's say, for example, what was $1,000 bill is a $500 bill a month, right? And you extend that out, and so now you're saving, thousands of dollars every year. And okay, so maybe the Verizon's not giving you that $1,000 check, but it doesn't matter anymore, because now you're saving, 5,000 every year because your phone bill has been cut in half. So, the economic incentives, I believe, are there. We just need to do a better job of collecting that information, and then what do you call it? Indexing it in a way, synthesizing it in a way that people can understand it, right? That there's more work, specifically like the campaign that I think that would be the people that would be in this with us the easiest, I believe, are the Cable Workers Association, the Communications, Communications Workers Association, right? Because their interest is wiring, right? Their interest is wiring. And if you wire every single neighborhood, every 1,000 houses, it's got to be some kind of number associated with number of jobs that creates. And if you had to wire the entire city or the entire county, right? How many more jobs is that for the very union whose business is to do wiring, right? It seems like there's just like way more money in that, right? That should be committed than to allowing the wireless industry to kind of dictate where they're going. I mean, and plus it's third-rate technology, right? It's lower end technology. And so what we kind of have right now, and I'll just say this last point, I want to hear what you said. It's kind of like letting the wagon be the lead in, the little red wagon, right? Kind of pull the Ford F-150, which represents fiber optics, right? It's like, it should be the other way around. The Ford F-150 should be, pulling the little red wagon, right? Because there's more power there. And that's, fiber is the truck, the little red wagon is 5G, right? So it's like, why are we letting wireless, which we already know doesn't work well, as its challenges, why are we letting that drive, this so important issue for us? I mean,
Right.
this project, let's call it a project, right? Because that's what it is. The wiring of America, building out a world-class telecommunication infrastructure is a project that we should be taking very seriously and not leaving it in the hands of this industry that has already failed us and that cannot be trusted, right? I'm sorry, and I cut you off.
No, that's a great analogy. I there's so many things you've said. I was thinking about the Communications Workers of America have put out documents, reports calling 5G hype that is only going to worsen the digital divide. And they've outlined, what's really going on, the redlining, the lack of actually connecting the people that are being claimed to connect. I saw the report with, I think it was the Sacramento report with Verizon and what's been happening there.
That was an amazing report, right? It was so revealing, right?
I know.
Wow, man.
And that's happening. I mean, why? I guess we're all in this fairy tale. I think of it like 5G is just a fairy tale. There's no there.
My favorite term. Not really.
And I remember when this was a couple of years ago, because I didn't know how that worked until I was walking in to testify at a utility company hearing on smart meters. And they were upping our rates and also hyping it for the smart meters and this new smart technology, and many people there testifying about the smart meters and the radiation issue. But in comes this woman who I was like, wait, she's the head of the organic farm that does all this wonderful educational stuff. And I was so excited. And I saw her as we were walking in with a big smile. we walk in, I'm like, oh, this is so cool.
You're like,
And
yeah, baby.
and then she goes up and she testifies about how great the utility company is and how wonderful they are. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's the organic farm that like my kids go and we like, what? And I didn't know. And now, of course, that I'm involved in this issue, that had to be almost a decade ago. And suddenly it became clear what's going on here. And, I knew why she kind of was not mean to me, but not like warm and friendly. And then when she testified, she bolted out of there like I don't want, she just came in and went out.
Yeah.
She did her job. She paid. She had to pay. You have to pay the price
Right.
when you get the donations.
Yeah. And so, but the thing is that she might have got, who knows how much. See, this is the funny thing, right? Is that small people who don't understand how this game works, right? And a small donation of $1,000, even $1,000, right? These small nonprofits, right? Who are doing great work, no knock on them and what they're doing, right? But just the relationship or the perceived obligation that they have to the industry that gives them that donation, right? Can be as small, and they know this, right? The industry knows this. Oh, we only need to give them $1,000. We only need to give them $2,000, right? But they do it to 100 organizations, right? Now it's like $100,000, which is still chump change, right, for these guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they've hit 100 organizations in an area with a little bit of money, and let's say they can only get, a fifth of them to come out and speak. Man, that's enough. And it's in its Black community, it's it's the Latino community, it's the Asian community, it's the autistic community, it's the mental health community. You know what I mean? Now, it looks very diverse, and it appears to be impressive, right? But it's a strategy. I mean, it's
Right.
a now playbook, right?
Right.
This is what we got to do. We got to give, and we're going to give you this much, this much change. Here's your little change that you get. What do you call it? Public affairs managers of Verizon and AT&T, and spend it wisely, because we're going to need these. We're going to need these people to come in and testify for us, down the road. And it can be the big guys too, the big guns, the Black Chamber for California, the Hispanic Chamber for California. They have to get a little bit more money. I think, I don't know what the exact amount is, but they give these statewide nonprofits a little bit more money, but their voice is expected to be heard in favor of whatever the industry wants them to do. And there's no question about it, right? And it's just like, so you're right. I mean, to your point, it is a lot about the money, and the survival of some of these, nonprofit organizations is highly dependent upon these donations.
Right.
See from industry, right? So it's like,
Right.
okay, do we kind of, fold up our tents and go home because Larry says this is unhealthy for, small children, or do we, go with this thing? And that's where we have to be, us as advocates, on this side of the argument, right? Is that's where we have to be creative, and we have to say, okay, there's a greater economic opportunity on this side, right? If cities, were then providing broadband and your costs went down by half, and they were now regulated, and say they were mandated, if they make, let's say, for example, one of the things that we were trying to do with Bank of America during the big banking scandal, right? And I was part of a larger statewide coalition of folks, right? One of the things we were trying to do with Bank of America is like, okay, you make 25% of your revenue from California, right? We want you to give 25% of your, your nonprofit giving to California. Right now, you're only giving 11%. So we had all this data, right? And we were trying to make it a mandate, as they were trying to come out of this. And it was a good time because they were like under TARP, and they were under all these, obligations that, they were trying to do everything they could to look good. And so we were like, well, we want to mandate that, whatever revenue you make, that's the amount of money from your foundation you're giving back into the community, right? And we were looking at that, trying to make that. Didn't fly, but it was something that, that was worth considering, that, if there's more economic, and I think if we could have showed that more people, that is, if we could have gotten to more people to say, look, if we mandate this for Bank of America, there's going to be more money for you in the long run than if you go along with them right now in this way. So we need to present the two kind of proposals, financially, speaking, economically speaking. And I'm not sure that, that we're there yet, but it's something that I think, that we can plan towards, that needs to be, that's the only way. I mean, you're right. I mean,
It's the only way. Well, the companies, the companies state in their 10Ks to their shareholders that if there's a problem, they financially can take hits. They say that they can't get insurance for damages because the insurance companies have electromagnetic radiation and non-ionizing radiation exclusionary clauses,
Right.
and stopped covering mobile operators in the United States, like in the 90s when the first brain tumors were beginning to be shown. But they define pollution. It is defined as pollution, cell phone radiation. It's not, it's just part of their pollution clause, and it's, asbestos, lead, they have microwaves, and then they say non-ionizing radiation. But I always say, I'm going to use it again, the pinky swear. They all have a pinky swear going on, because as soon as the technology is safer, which we know they are looking into figuring out how to do, whoever gets it first is going to, they can't do it. You can't have one having safer technology unless they all have it. I don't know if you know that in China, they actually made a baby safe router. It was a router for pregnant women, and it had a setting to make the radiation lower. It was killed. The attacks were relentless as to what happened, because the companies were like, yeah, no, we don't, no. No, this is not something that there's going to be a conversation about, because it hurts the bottom line. But I think we need to make the case, the economic case on this. And one thing that I'm jumping around a little bit, but one thing I've brought up is when you actually look at the technology, the apparatus, I'm talking about the equipment. Every time there's something new, you have to upgrade it, right? Swap it out. We want the old, we want the new one. Well, that's a kind of an easy, in terms of the working that goes in, a worker gets it, might bring it to the home, or they ship it, right? And it's not really helping workers here. It's costing us money. It costs money to swap out for the new modem. It's not, for schools, for example, the amount of work that they're putting into and the money to upgrade. We just had an upgrade in our schools, and then they upgraded again 2 years later. Oh, that's not good enough. Now we have to upgrade again. They keep upgrading with all the system, and our taxpayers are paying money for that. It's not really benefiting the people or the kids, and it's never good enough. Whereas if you had that hardwired broadband that brought it in so that we had the speed we needed, we wouldn't have to be upgrading all those things that are spewing it everywhere, the access points and so forth. And same with the antenna systems. They just keep doing more and more and more, trying to get to what we already know we could have.
Right.
What I'm using right now, which is a wired connection.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
It certainly is certainly is a mystery. I think that, when talking to the guy that does all of the deputy superintendent for facilities for the local school district,
Mm-hmm.
I was sharing with him. Have you seen the video that, Patty and Doug Wood, right?
Indeed, sure. Very well.
So Patty did a video. She put out a video that it's a cartoon video that showed how the wireless dangers in the schools. You seen that?
Yes.
Okay. So when I shared that with this individual with the facilities, I said, we really need to start looking at this, because it will greatly enhance the learning environment for our children, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is that's your charge, right? That's what you're supposed to do, as a facilities manager, is like whatever you can to enhance the learning environment. And I showed him the video, and he goes, well, what are you talking about? Are you talking about like wiring all the schools, hardwiring and taking out all the wireless? And I go, yeah. He goes, well, we just invested the whole, X amount of millions of dollars to upgrade the wireless infrastructure. And I was like, okay, well, we need to redirect that. He goes, well, I don't really know how you're going to do that, right? It's like, right out of the gate, right? Is this like all these people that, and he's got a pretty big checkbook, right? To, as a facilities manager, he's, writing, maybe $100 million, $100 million a year, right? And it's like, he can't even see, or that's not even on his radar screen, right? It's like to technically it's what he's supposed to be doing, right? But in reality, what he's doing is like just continuing to feed the system
Mm-hmm.
and it dropped into, right? Like, okay, wireless gets this much amount of money every year.
Mm-hmm.
All of their affiliates get this amount of money about every year. Here's the codes that we support to give these people this money. And it's like not even the kids are inconsequential, right? In terms of that learning environment, it's just like, I mean, they don't matter. You know, we just got to plug into the system. And so that would change if we could then get like the union, right? Like the, let's say, for example, the International Brotherhood of Electric Workers, IBEW, the local in LA, and we could say, look at, hey man, what do you call it? Pomona's spending 100 million, you know, every year. Not all of it's going to, you know, wireless, but it's a good chunk of change. We think that if you guys can come up with a forecast of what it would cost to wire a school, right? Completely wire a school and get all the, you know, yank all the wireless out.
Oh, I want that forecast. Let's talk that. Let's do it.
Yeah, right. We think that we can make a push for it. We can help you. We can, you know, we'll be there. You know, we'll be the troops on the ground trying to make that happen, right? And you know, let's get there. And then how many jobs would that create? And so it's not only the school, but the whole entire district. And it's not only this district, it's these 3 surrounding schools as well. And it's, you know, and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden, you now have a new economic system, right? Or a new, yeah, you have a new economic system, right? It's not just the wireless, like the system of the wireless is pretty settled, right? But now you have a competing interest. But the thing is here's the thing, right? So I've had some conversations with the leadership at IBEW, and for whatever reason, you know, they're currently not interested. You know, I think they see it as too heavy of a lift. They don't understand enough how many people, like the breadth of our organizations combined, right? All of us, right? EH Trust and, you know, Patty and Doug and the folks that, you know, that are in California and in my organization and all of those, you know, if they understood that they had the breadth of those institutions behind them in this fight, I think it would make them more willing to say, okay, hey man, we're ready for this fight. We're gonna do this. I think, I don't know, either that or it's just the leadership saying, man, you know, I just have 3 more years for retirement. Don't rock my boat, man. Don't jack with my stuff, you know, and you know, if you go up against these guys, it's going to be a bloodbath, and you know, it's going to be, you know, whatever. I don't know what they're thinking, right? But I know, getting back to our, you know, kind of what we were just talking about, the economic plan, right, and the impact that is available at our disposal, literally at our disposal, right? If that was some way articulated as the counter to, you know, what the nonprofits are currently getting right now and what could be possible here, I think it could go some way. And I think that really is I think that's really the pathway forward for us on this thing. Because as much as we want to say, no, it can't be just about money.
It's just
yeah, it is. Right?
I mean, look at the lead lines. So we're replacing lead lines in communities. We got maps looking at states. Where is the water system leaded? What do we need to do? I mean, you know, 10 years ago, this conversation wouldn't happen. It would have been like, no, we can't do that. And now look at how we're paying. But you know, there are jobs. I mean, this is creating jobs.
Right.
Doing that work, and let's get ahead of it, because we don't want to be here again. We're already here again. It doesn't make any sense. You can build, when we build buildings, they can be built with the wired connections. We found here in Maryland, in Montgomery County, that most of the schools actually have they're already hardwired with a port into each classroom. And all that's needed is the equipment to extend that, to design it so that there's a way for kids around the classroom to hook up. I actually met with it was the head of IT in Haifa, Israel. There was a conference on wireless. It was an international conference with over a dozen countries represented by scientists. And the IT director was describing how what he ended up doing for the classrooms, because they took the wireless out and put in all wired, rather than hiring, they started training their own staff how to do it and bringing in these new designs and way to make it work. I mean, it's possible to do. I don't see people say it's impossible, but it's already being done.
Yeah.
There's countries where that's what they do. So why can't we do it? And when we build, we should build it with wires. We have schools that we have to retrofit. We have entire homes everywhere that need to be retrofitted, and people want to pay for that. They want people to come in, put in the wires. A lot of times here, people get retired workers who work for Verizon or so forth are the ones who are coming and putting in their wires.
Yeah.
Because they know how to do it. Whereas, of course, less and less people know, because now we're just using wireless this and wireless that, but it doesn't really work that well in a home. You got to get the booster now, and that with all the stuff people are bringing in, now they need to bring in more access points and routers to even make everything connect. It's just getting completely out of hand.